What if the person you ignore every single day, the one you roll your eyes at, the one you think is holding you back, is actually the one holding your entire future? I almost lost my forever because I was too busy chasing a version of success that didn't exist. This is my real story. An Uber driver husband, a broken marriage, and the one night that changed everything. Stay with me. The man I pass by every day. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you're living in a house with someone, but you've built an invisible wall so thick that you no longer see them. You eat at the same table, you sleep in the same bed, but your eyes slide right over them like they're part of the furniture. That was me. That was my life with Mark, my husband, for nearly 2 years. Every morning, I would wake up, make coffee for myself, just myself, and rush to my laptop. I was building my career. I was chasing what I thought was the American dream. A title, a salary, a LinkedIn profile that would make people back home proud. And every morning, Mark would quietly grab his keys, slip on his jacket, and head out to his car. His Uber car. The silver Honda that sat in our driveway like a quiet reminder of everything I thought we'd failed at. I never asked him how his day was. Not really. I'd say, "How was work?" while staring at my screen, already thinking about the next email. He'd say it was fine. And I'd nod without hearing the exhaustion in his voice. Because in my mind he was just the Uber driver. The guy who used to be a software engineer back in our home country. The guy who couldn't find a job in his field when we moved here, so he did what he had to do. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing the man I married. I only saw what he did for money. This video, right here, is not just about learning English. It's about learning to see again. And I'm telling you this in slow, simple English because I know what it's like to feel stuck. Stuck in a language, stuck in a marriage, stuck in a life you didn't imagine for yourself. So if you're here to practice your listening, your reading, your speaking, welcome. But if you're here because somewhere deep down you feel like you're ignoring something, or someone, that matters, then stay. Because this is the story of how I almost lost my forever by looking right past it. Let me take you back to the beginning of that blindness. When we first moved to the United States, I was full of fire. I had a degree in marketing, years of experience, and the naive belief that hard work alone would open every door. Mark had his engineering background. We arrived with 2 suitcases and a dream. But the dream hit reality fast. Our credentials? They needed to be reevaluated. Our accents? They made phone interviews awkward. Our savings? They disappeared into rent, bills, and the endless loop of "we'll call you back." I found a job first. Not in marketing. A receptionist position at a small dental office. I took it because we needed money. And Mark couldn't find anything. Month after month, he applied to hundreds of engineering jobs. He went to networking events where people smiled at him, and then never replied to his emails. I watched his shoulders sink lower every week. And one evening he sat me down and said, "I'm going to drive for Uber. Just until something comes." I remember my first thought. I didn't say it out loud, but it was there, ugly and sharp. That's not who you are. But who were we then? We were 2 people barely surviving in a country that didn't owe us anything. So he drove. And I let myself believe that it was temporary. That any day now, a job offer would come, and we would return to the life I had pictured. But the job offer didn't come. Not that year. Not the next. And somewhere in that waiting, something shifted in me. I started to look at Mark differently. Not with compassion, but with disappointment. I told myself it was because I was worried about our future. But really, I was worried about my image. What would my family think? What would my friends? Every time I introduced him at a gathering, I'd rush to add, "He used to be an engineer." As if his present wasn't enough. As if he wasn't enough. And Mark just kept driving. He'd come home with stories, funny stories about passengers, about the city, about the little things he noticed. I didn't listen. I was too busy studying for certifications, trying to claw my way up the career ladder. I'd stay up late working, and he'd fall asleep on the couch waiting for me to finish. I'd wake up early, and he'd already be gone. We were two ships passing in the night, but we lived in the same house. The turning point didn't come with a loud crash. It came with silence. A silence so heavy I could feel it pressing on my chest every night. We stopped arguing because arguing would have required caring enough to fight. We existed. We paid bills. We ate dinner without conversation. And I told myself this was normal. This was what marriage looked like after the honeymoon phase. I told myself I was just busy, just focused, just waiting for our real life to begin. But here's what I didn't understand back then. Your real life is happening right now. In the moments you ignore. In the person you pass by every single day. The man with the keys, the silver Honda, the quiet have a good day, that I never returned. He wasn't just an Uber driver. He was the person who held my forever in his hands. And I was too busy staring at a future I couldn't control to notice the love that was sitting right in front of me. I know some of you watching this feel that same distance. Maybe not in a marriage. Maybe with your own dream. Maybe with learning English. You keep telling yourself, I'll start tomorrow. I'll practice when I have more time. I'll speak when I'm perfect. But perfect doesn't come. And time doesn't wait. And the person or the dream you're ignoring right now might be the one thing that could change everything. So let's pause here. Because this is where my story gets real. This is where the silence finally broke. And I want you to sit with that question for a moment. What if the person you ignore holds your forever? Close your eyes if you need to. Think about who or what you've been passing by. Because the next part is where I learn to see again. When pride whispers louder than love. Have you ever woken up one morning and realized you've become someone you don't recognize? Not in your face, not in your clothes, but in the way you treat the person who loves you most? I had that morning. It was a Tuesday. Mark had left early as always. I was getting ready for work, and I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I didn't see the woman who had arrived in America with fire in her eyes. I saw someone tight, bitter. Someone who measured her worth by her job title and her husband's paycheck. And the worst part? I blamed Mark for that feeling. Let me be honest with you, because if I'm not honest, this story means nothing. I was embarrassed. Embarrassed that my husband drove a car for a living while I answered phones at a dental office. Embarrassed at family gatherings when people asked, "What does your husband do?" I'd mumble something about him transitioning careers or taking a break. I never said, "He works harder than anyone I know. He wakes up at 5 in the morning and drives strangers around our city, so we can pay our rent." I couldn't say that. Because my pride was louder than my love. And pride is a dangerous thing. It doesn't scream at you. It whispers. It whispers, "You deserve more." It whispers, "He should try harder." It whispers, "This isn't the life you signed up for." And those whispers over time become your truth. I stopped seeing Mark's sacrifice and started seeing his failure. I stopped seeing the man who held my hand through immigration paperwork, who learned to cook when I was too exhausted, who never once complained about losing his career, so I could pursue mine. I saw only what I wanted to see, a gap between where we were and where I thought we should be. In America, there's this unspoken pressure to perform, to succeed, to have a story that sounds impressive at dinner parties. I fell into that trap. I compared our life to others, the couples who bought houses, who got promotions, who posted vacation photos from places I couldn't pronounce. And every comparison was a small knife in my heart. Instead of turning to Mark and saying, We're in this together. I turned away. I built a wall of resentment. And walls don't just keep people out. They trap you inside with your own worst thoughts. Mark, meanwhile, was learning America in a way I never had to. He was in the car 8-10 hours a day. He heard people's stories, their fights, their dreams, their confessions to strangers in the back seat. He learned English not from textbooks, but from listening to passengers argue about sports, cry about breakups, laugh about stupid things at 3 in the morning. His English became fluid, natural, full of the rhythms of real life. Misunderstanding. Professional. Because I was still trying to sound correct, still afraid of making mistakes. Isn't that funny? I was so worried about looking successful. But the person who was truly growing, who was truly living the American experience, was the one I was ignoring. Mark didn't care if his grammar was perfect. He cared about connection. He'd come home and tell me about a passenger who was going through a divorce, and he'd say, "You know, she just needed someone to listen." He was learning what I was forgetting. That language is not about perfection. It's about reaching another human being. I want to pause here, because if you're watching this to practice English, this is the lesson I wish I had learned earlier. You don't need to sound like a native speaker. You don't need to memorize every rule. You need to speak. You need to make mistakes. You need to listen to real people, not just apps and textbooks. Mark's English improved because he was in the messy, beautiful, unpredictable stream of real conversation every single day. I was hiding behind my screen, afraid to sound foolish, and my English stayed the same, just like my heart. So there I was, living in a house with a man who was quietly becoming fluent in American life, and I couldn't see it. I only saw the Uber sticker on his windshield. I only saw the tiredness in his eyes when he came home. I didn't see the confidence he was building. The patience. The deep understanding of people that no classroom could ever teach. I was so focused on what we didn't have that I ignored what we did have. A man who never gave up, who showed up every single day, who loved me even when I was cold and distant. The turning point, the real one, didn't come from a fight. It came from a small, unexpected moment. Mark's mother called from our home country. She asked how he was doing. I was in the kitchen pretending to cook, but I was listening. Mark said, "I'm good, Mom. Work is work. But you know what? I helped a young man today. He was going to a job interview, super nervous. I told him to breathe, to speak slowly, to be himself. He got the job. He called me after. And he laughed. A real laugh. I hadn't heard that laugh in months. And in that moment, something cracked in my chest. Because I realized, Mark was happy. Not waiting for some future success to be happy. Happy right now. Finding meaning in small moments. Helping people. Being present. And I was miserable because I was waiting for a life that didn't exist yet. I was so busy ignoring my present that I was ignoring the only person who could help me enjoy it. That night, I almost said something. I opened my mouth to apologize, to say I was sorry for how cold I'd been. But the words got stuck. Because pride doesn't let go easily. It holds on with both hands. I swallowed my apology and went back to my laptop. And Mark went to sleep alone on the couch again. I tell you this because I know what it's like to want to change, but to feel paralyzed by your own ego. To know you're wrong but not know how to say it. To look at someone who loves you and feel the weight of everything you haven't said. If you're there right now, in a relationship, in your English learning, in your life, I want you to know, the silence doesn't make it better. It just makes the wall thicker. So what happened next? Did I stay silent forever? Did we drift apart until there was nothing left? No. Because life has a way of forcing us to listen. And the night that forced me to listen came when I least expected it. It came in the back seat of a silver Honda. The unseen sacrifice of the driver's seat. So there I was, sitting in the back seat of a silver Honda. Not my husband's car, not yet. This was a different night, a different ride. But I need to tell you about that night in detail, because it was the moment everything shifted. And I need to start with what I didn't know about Mark's world. The world he inhabited for 10 hours a day while I sat at home judging him. Have you ever thought about what it means to drive strangers for a living? I hadn't. Not once. I thought it was simple. Pick someone up, drop them off, collect the money. But Mark's job was teaching him things I couldn't learn in any marketing seminar. He was learning America from the inside out. Not the America of career fairs and LinkedIn connections, but the real America. The America of people who work 2 jobs to feed their kids. Of immigrants who speak broken English, but have PhDs from countries you've never heard of. Of lonely people who book an Uber just to have someone to talk to. Mark told me stories, but I never listened. He'd come home and say, I picked up a woman today. She was crying. Her husband left her after 20 years. She didn't know where to go. And I'd nod, already thinking about my email. Or he'd say, a young guy from Brazil got in my car today. He's studying engineering at night and cleaning offices during the day. He reminded me of myself. And I'd think, why is he telling me this? I didn't understand that he wasn't just telling me about his day. He was telling me about his heart. The sacrifice Mark made wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. Every day, he walked out the door knowing that some passengers would look down on him. Some would treat him like furniture. Some would close the door and say, finally an American driver, when they saw his face, assuming he was from here. Assuming he was lucky enough to be born in the country that now made him feel invisible. He never corrected them. He just drove. And here's what I didn't see. While I was chasing promotions, Mark was learning emotional intelligence. He was learning how to calm down an angry passenger. How to help someone who was lost in a new city. How to listen without judgment. He was becoming a better human being, and I was becoming a harder one. But I couldn't see that because I was too busy measuring success the way America had taught me. By job titles and bank accounts. There's a word in English that Mark taught me later, resilience. It means the ability to bounce back from difficulty. Mark had it. I didn't. When his engineering career didn't work out, he didn't crumble. He pivoted. He found a way to contribute. He never complained, not once. Meanwhile, I complained about everything. The apartment was too small. The weather was too cold. My coworkers were too loud. I was a storm of dissatisfaction. And Mark was the calm I kept trying to blow away. One evening, I came home from work furious. My boss had given a project I wanted to someone else. I slammed the door, threw my bag on the couch, and started ranting. Mark was in the kitchen making dinner, something he'd learned to do because I was always too tired. He listened quietly. Then he said, "Do you want me to just listen, or do you want my opinion?" I snapped, "I don't want anything from you." And I saw his face change. Not anger. Just a quiet sadness. He turned back to the stove. And I went to our room and shut the door. That moment haunts me now. Because what I didn't know was that Mark had also had a hard day. He'd picked up a passenger who insulted him for taking a wrong turn. Another passenger had left a 1-star review for no reason. His back was hurting from sitting all day. But he came home, put on a smile, and tried to take care of me. And I threw it back in his face. I was so consumed by my own struggles that I forgot he had struggles too. This is where I want to pause for those of you learning English. There's a phrase you might hear, walk a mile in someone's shoes. It means to try to understand another person's experience before judging them. I had never walked a mile in Mark's shoes. I had never sat in his driver's seat. I had no idea what his days were like. I only knew my own frustration. and my frustration had built a wall so high that I couldn't see anything else. But life, as I said, has a way of forcing you to see. The night that changed everything came after another fight. A small one about money. I don't even remember what started it. But I remember the end. Mark grabbed his keys and said, "I'm going for a drive." And I let him go. I sat on the couch, angry and self-righteous, convinced I was the victim. Hours passed. He didn't come back. I called him. No answer. I texted. No reply. And slowly anger turned to worry. Then worry turned to fear. At around midnight, I did something I had never done before. I opened the Uber app. I typed in his name, and I saw that his car was still moving, picking up passengers across the city. He was working. At midnight. After we had fought. He wasn't out drinking or avoiding me. He was out earning money because we were behind on rent. Because I had just complained about not having enough for a new coat. Because he was carrying our family on his shoulders while I was busy feeling sorry for myself. I sat there staring at that little car icon moving across the map, and I cried. Not angry tears. Not self-pitying tears. I cried because I finally saw him. I saw a man who had given up his career, his pride, his comfort, so that I could have a chance. I saw a man who woke up every morning and chose to love a woman who treated him like a failure. I saw the sacrifice I had been blind to for 2 years. And in that moment, I understood something I had never understood before. Love is not a feeling. It is a choice. Mark had been choosing me every single day. Even when I gave him nothing in return. He had been choosing our family, our future, our stability. And I had been choosing my pride, my image, my idea of what life should look like instead of the life that was right in front of me. The next morning, Mark came home. It was almost 4 a.m. He looked exhausted. He sat on the edge of the bed and started taking off his shoes. I pretended to be asleep. I was too ashamed to say anything. But inside, something had broken open. I knew I couldn't go on like this. I knew I had to change. But how? How do you undo 2 years of coldness? How do you tell someone you're sorry when the words feel too small? I didn't have the answer that night. But I knew one thing. I had to start listening. Really listening. Not just to Mark's words, but to his life. And the first thing I needed to listen to was the one place I had never sat before. The driver's seat. A Love Silence by Misunderstanding. Here's something I've learned about silence. It doesn't mean nothing is happening. In fact, silence is often louder than any argument. The silence between Mark and me had grown so thick that I could feel it pressing against my skin every time we were in the same room. We had become experts at not talking. We talked about bills. We talked about our children's school schedules. We talked about who would pick up groceries. But we never talked about us. And that silence was slowly killing everything we had built. Do you know what I thought during those quiet months? I thought Mark didn't care anymore. I thought he had given up on us. I interpreted his silence as indifference. I told myself, if he loved me, he would fight for me. He would say something. He would break through this wall. But I was the one who had built the wall. And I was waiting for him to tear it down while I stood on the other side, arms crossed, refusing to help. That's the thing about misunderstanding. It doesn't come from one big lie. It comes from 1,000 small assumptions. I assumed Mark was okay with driving Uber. I assumed he didn't miss his engineering career. I assumed he didn't notice when I pulled away. I assumed his silence meant he didn't care. Every single one of those assumptions was wrong. But I never asked. I never said, Mark, how are you really doing? I never gave him space to tell me the truth. Mark, on the other hand, had his own assumptions. He assumed I was disappointed in him. He assumed I regretted marrying him. He assumed I was only staying because of the children. And those assumptions made him retreat further into his silence. He stopped trying to hold my hand. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped saying I love you first. Not because he didn't feel it, but because he was afraid of what I might say back. We were both protecting ourselves from the same fear. That the other person had already given up. So there we were, living parallel lives under the same roof. I would wake up, get the kids ready for school, go to work. Mark would drive his morning shifts, pick up the kids in the afternoon, make dinner. We passed each other like shadows. And at night, after the kids were asleep, we would sit on opposite ends of the couch, staring at our phones, pretending we were too tired to talk. But it wasn't exhaustion. It was fear. The saddest part? I still loved him. I never stopped loving him. But I had confused love with something else. I thought love meant never feeling disappointed. I thought love meant always being proud of your partner. I thought if I really loved Mark, I wouldn't care that he drove Uber. But I did care. And I hated myself for caring. So instead of facing that feeling, I buried it. I buried it under work, under ambition, under the constant pursuit of more. And in burying that feeling, I buried my love right along with it. One night, I overheard Mark on the phone with his brother. They were speaking in our native language, so he didn't know I was listening from the hallway. His brother asked, "How is she?" And Mark said, "She's busy. Always busy. I think she's waiting for something better to come along. I don't know if that something includes me anymore." He paused. Then he said, "But I can't leave. I have the kids. And I still love her. Even when she doesn't look at me, I still love her." I stood there in the hallway, my hand over my mouth, tears running down my face. He still loved me. Even when I didn't look at him. Even when I treated him like a stranger. Even when I made him feel like he wasn't enough. He still loved me. And in that moment, I realized something that should have been obvious. The person I had been ignoring wasn't ignoring me. He was waiting. He was holding space for me to come back. He was holding my forever in his hands, and I had been too blind to see it. For those of you learning English, there's a phrase you might find useful. To take someone for granted. It means to assume someone will always be there, to stop appreciating them because you think they'll never leave. I had taken Mark for granted. I had assumed his love was unconditional, so I stopped treating it as precious. I stopped watering the garden of our marriage, and then wondered why everything was dying. But here's what I also learned. Taking someone for granted is not the same as not loving them. I loved Mark. I just forgot to show it. And that forgetting had built a wall between us that felt impossible to climb. Every day I didn't say something was another brick. Every night I turned away was another layer. By the time I realized what I was doing, the wall felt 10 feet high. I didn't know how to start breaking it down. Let me ask you something. Are you building a wall right now? With someone you love? With a dream you've stopped pursuing? With your own ability to speak English because you're too afraid to make mistakes? Because I've learned that walls don't protect you. They trap you. They keep out the very people who could help you heal. And the longer you let the wall stand, the harder it feels to tear it down. I spent weeks after that night trying to figure out how to start. I rehearsed apologies in my head. I wrote letters I never sent. I would open my mouth to say something and then close it again. Because I had been silent for so long that words felt foreign. I had forgotten how to speak to the man I loved. And isn't that ironic? I was so focused on perfecting my professional English, but I had lost the language of my own heart. The breakthrough didn't come from a big speech. It came from a small act. One Saturday, Mark was getting ready to leave for his shift. The kids were at a friend's house. It was just us. And as he picked up his keys, I walked over to him and said, "Can I come with you today?" He looked at me like I had spoken a language he didn't understand. "What?" he said. I repeated, Can I ride with you today? Just for a few hours. I want to see what your day is like. He stared at me for a long moment. I could see him trying to figure out what my angle was. Why would I, after 2 years of ignoring his work, suddenly want to be part of it? But he didn't ask. He just nodded. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. And that's how I found myself, on a cloudy Saturday morning, climbing into the passenger seat of my husband's silver Honda. The seat I had never sat in. The world I had never entered. I didn't know it then, but that ride would change everything. Because sometimes the only way to tear down a wall is to walk through it. And that day, I finally took the first step. The night the truth rode shotgun. Let me tell you about that Saturday. The morning I climbed into the passenger seat of my husband's silver Honda. I remember the smell first. Coffee. Not fresh coffee, but the kind that sits in a travel mug for hours, growing bitter. And something else, air freshener. One of those little trees hanging from the rearview mirror. Mark had always said he hated those things. But there it was, swaying gently as we pulled out of the driveway. I didn't know what to say. I had spent 2 years not talking to him. And now I was sitting 2 feet away in a space that belonged entirely to him. The car was clean. Immaculate, actually. Every surface wiped. The seats vacuumed. A small container of mints in the cup holder. I realized, with a sudden ache in my chest, that this car was his office. His sanctuary. The place where he spent more waking hours than our home. And I had never once asked him about it. The first hour was awkward. Mark drove in silence, waiting for the Uber app to ping. I watched the city pass by outside the window. Streets I had driven 100 times looked different from this angle. Lower. Closer to the ground. I saw people waiting at bus stops, carrying groceries, walking dogs. I saw the city in a way I never had before. And I thought, this is what he sees every day. This is his world. Then the first ride came. A woman in her 60s, heading to a doctor's appointment. She climbed into the back seat and said, "Good morning, Mark." She knew his name. She had ridden with him before. They talked like old friends. She asked about his kids. He asked about her garden. She told him her tomatoes were doing well this year. He laughed and said, "Save me one next time." When she got out, she said, "Take care of yourself." And Mark replied, "You too, Mrs. Helen. You too." I stared at him. I had never seen this side of Mark. The easy conversation. The genuine warmth. The way he remembered details about people's lives. This was not the quiet, exhausted man who came home at midnight. This was someone else. Someone who mattered to people. Someone who made a difference in small, invisible ways. The next passenger was a young man, maybe 22, carrying a backpack that looked heavier than he did. He got in and immediately put his head back, eyes closed. Mark drove in silence for a few minutes. Then he said quietly, "Rough day?" The young man opened his eyes. "I just got laid off," he said. "Third job this year." Mark nodded. "I've been there," he said. "It's hard. But you'll find something. You look like someone who doesn't give up." They talked for the rest of the ride. Mark told him about his own journey. Leaving engineering, driving Uber, learning to see value in himself beyond his job title. The young man listened. When he got out, he shook Mark's hand and said, "Thank you. I really needed to hear that." Mark just smiled. "You're going to be okay," he said. And I believed him. I sat there in the passenger seat, my heart pounding. Who was this man? I had been married to him for 8 years, and I had never seen him like this. I had been so busy looking at what he didn't have. A corner office, a title, a LinkedIn profile that impressed strangers, that I had missed who he actually was. A man who made people feel seen. A man who turned a simple car ride into a moment of connection. A man who was, in the truest sense of the word good. For those of you learning English, let me teach you a word. Humble. It means not thinking you're better than others. It means being comfortable with who you are, even if who you are doesn't look impressive to the outside world. Mark was humble. He had accepted his life, found meaning in it, and built something beautiful in the smallest of spaces. I, on the other hand, was still trying to prove I was someone. And in that pursuit, I had lost myself. By the fifth ride, I couldn't stay silent anymore. Between passengers, I turned to Mark and said, "I didn't know you were like this." He glanced at me, then back at the road. "Like what?" "Like this. Kind. Patient. The way you talk to people. The way you listen." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've always been like this. You just stopped looking." Those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Because he was right. He had always been kind. Always patient. Always the one who listened, who cared, who showed up. I was the one who had changed. I was the one who had stopped seeing him. I had let my disappointment become a lens that distorted everything. And in that lens, his kindness looked like weakness. His patience looked like passivity. His love looked like dependence. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to say 1,000 things. But the Uber app pinged again, and another passenger was waiting. This time, it was a man in a suit, talking loudly on his phone. He didn't acknowledge Mark. Didn't say hello. Just slammed the door and kept talking. When he got out, he didn't say thank you. Mark didn't react. He just waited for the next ride. I asked him, "Doesn't that bother you? When people treat you like that?" He shrugged. "Sometimes. But I don't know what they're going through. Maybe he just lost a deal. Maybe his wife left him. Maybe he's scared and doesn't know how to show it. It's not about me. It's never about me." He paused. "That's what I've learned in this car. Everyone is carrying something. And sometimes, the people who seem the coldest are the ones who need the most warmth." I looked at my husband. Really looked. And I saw him for the first time in 2 years. Not the Uber driver. Not the failed engineer. Not the man I had measured against a yardstick of success that was never ours. I saw Mark. The man who held my hand when we landed in America, both of us terrified. The man who stayed up with our babies so I could sleep. The man who never once said, "You're not enough," even when I said it to him every day with my silence. That night, after we got home, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the couch and waited for Mark. He came in, exhausted, ready to go to bed. I said, "Can we talk?" He sat down. Not on the opposite end of the couch. Beside me. And I took a breath. I had been silent for so long. But that night, I finally found my voice. Learning to see again. That night, I sat on the couch beside Mark, and for the first time in 2 years, I didn't know where to begin. My throat felt tight. My hands were trembling. I had rehearsed apologies in my head so many times, but now that the moment was here, every word felt too small. How do you say sorry for 2 years of silence? How do you explain that you stopped seeing the person you loved most because you were too busy chasing a dream that didn't exist? Mark waited. He didn't rush me. He didn't fill the silence with questions or accusations. He just sat there, patient the way he had always been. And that patience, that quiet waiting, broke me open. I started crying. Not quiet tears. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep, somewhere you didn't even know you had been hurting. And Mark didn't say, "Don't cry." He didn't try to fix it. He just put his hand on mine. His hand was warm, calloused from holding the steering wheel for hours. And I realized I hadn't held that hand in months. "I'm sorry," I finally said. My voice was hoarse. "I'm so sorry, Mark." He looked at me, and I saw his eyes were wet too. "For what?" he asked. Not sarcastic. Not demanding. Just asking. Like he genuinely wanted to know what I thought I had done wrong. And that made me cry harder. Because after everything, he still wasn't keeping score. He still wasn't tallying up my failures against his. I told him everything. I told him about the embarrassment I had felt when people asked what he did. I told him about the comparisons I had made, the unrealistic expectations I had built in my head. I told him about the night I watched his car move across the Uber map and finally understood what he was carrying. I told him I had been wrong. So wrong. I had measured him against a standard that was never ours, and in doing so, I had made him feel small. I had made him feel invisible. Mark listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. He just let me speak. And when I finally ran out of words, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I will never forget. He said, "I knew you were struggling. I knew you were unhappy. I just didn't know how to reach you anymore. Every time I tried, you pulled away. So I stopped trying. Not because I didn't love you, because I didn't want to make it worse." Do you hear what he said? He stopped trying not because he gave up on me, but because he was trying to protect me. He thought his presence was adding to my unhappiness. He thought I needed space to become who I wanted to be. He had been stepping back, stepping aside, giving me room, and I had interpreted it as abandonment. Another assumption. Another misunderstanding. Another layer of the wall we had both been building without realizing it. That night we talked for hours. About everything. About the fear we both felt when we first arrived in America. About the dreams we had let go of, and the new dreams we were afraid to name. About the kids, about our families back home. About the loneliness that had crept into our marriage like a fog. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was breathing again. Like the air between us had cleared. Like I could finally see. For those of you learning English, here's a phrase that matters. To be on the same page. It means to understand each other, to share the same perspective. Mark and I had not been on the same page for a long time. I was reading one book, about success, about image, about what I thought life should look like. He was reading another, about patience, about presence, about finding meaning in small moments. That night, we finally closed our separate books and opened one together. The next morning something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a movie moment with music swelling in the background. It was small. Mark made coffee. 2 cups, one for me, one for himself. He handed me mine and I looked at him and said, "Thank you." Not the automatic thank you I had been saying for years. A real one. And he smiled. A real smile. And in that small exchange, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. But hope alone wasn't enough. I knew that. I had spent 2 years building habits of distance. I had trained myself to look away, to stay silent, to keep my heart protected behind a wall of busyness. Changing those habits would take more than one conversation. It would take practice. Every single day. And that's when I had an idea. An idea that would change not just our marriage, but my relationship with English, with learning, with everything. I told Mark, "Teach me." Not English. I already know English. Teach me what you've learned. In the car. With the passengers. The way you listen. The way you connect. I want to learn that. He looked surprised. "You want to ride with me?" he asked. And I said, "Yes. Not every day. But sometimes. I want to see what you see. I want to learn to be present the way you are." He agreed. And that was the beginning of something I never expected. Those rides became our healing. Sitting side by side in the silver Honda, watching the city pass, listening to strangers' stories. I learned more about America in those rides than I had in years of living here. I learned about the immigrant who opened a restaurant with nothing but a recipe from her grandmother. About the college student working 3 jobs to pay for a degree her parents didn't want her to get. About the elderly man who took Ubers every Tuesday just to have someone to talk to. And I learned about Mark. The way he remembered names. The way he asked questions that made people feel seen. The way he never rushed a goodbye. I had been looking for success in corner offices and job titles, and all along, success was sitting beside me, measuring life not in dollars but in moments, in connections, in the quiet dignity of showing up every day and being present for the people who crossed his path. I started to see that learning a language, whether English or the language of love, isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, making mistakes, listening more than you speak, being willing to look foolish in order to connect. Mark had mastered that in his car long before I ever sat beside him. And now he was teaching me. So here's what I want you to take from this part of the story. If you're learning English, stop trying to be perfect. Stop waiting until you sound like a native speaker to open your mouth. Language is not a test. It's a bridge. And bridges are built one imperfect step at a time. Mark didn't learn English from textbooks. He learned it from people. From listening. From being willing to say the wrong thing in order to find the right thing. I had been trying to learn English the way I tried to live my life. Controlled, careful, afraid of mistakes. And it had left me isolated. Stuck behind a wall of my own making. But the moment I started writing with Mark, the moment I started listening the way he listened, everything began to change. Not just my marriage. My whole way of being in the world. There was still a long road ahead. Healing doesn't happen overnight. But for the first time, I wasn't walking it alone. I was in the passenger seat, beside the man I had ignored for so long. And he was showing me a new way to see. Building a new language together. The rides became our ritual. Every Saturday, I would climb into the passenger seat of Mark's silver Honda, and we would drive. Not with a destination. Just driving. Waiting for the app to ping. Watching the city wake up. Listening to the rhythm of strangers' lives. And somewhere between the morning coffee and the evening traffic, I started to learn a new language. Not English. Not Vietnamese. The language of us. Have you ever thought about how couples develop their own way of communicating? Inside jokes. Shortcuts. Words that mean something only to the two of you. Mark and I had lost that. Somewhere in the silence, we had forgotten how to speak to each other. The rides gave us space to find it again. Without the pressure of the kids, without the distractions of home, just the two of us in a moving bubble, talking about nothing and everything. One Saturday, Mark picked up a passenger who was visiting from Brazil. Her English was shaky, full of pauses and self-corrections. She kept apologizing. Sorry, my English is not good. Sorry, I take too long to say. Mark didn't rush her. He just waited, listened, nodded. When she finally finished her sentence, he said, "Your English is beautiful. You're saying exactly what you mean. That's all language needs to do." I watched her face change. The tension in her shoulders softened. She smiled. And I realized Mark was doing for her what he had always done for me. Making her feel seen. Making her feel that her effort was enough. I had spent years believing I needed perfect English to be taken seriously. But here was my husband, with his simple, imperfect, beautifully human English, showing me that perfection was never the point. That night I told Mark, "Teach me to listen like you do." He laughed. "I can't teach that. It's just being there. Actually being there." And he was right. Listening wasn't a skill you learned from a book. It was a choice you made, moment by moment, to set aside your own thoughts and be present for someone else. I had stopped making that choice with Mark. I had been so consumed by my own struggles that I forgot he was struggling too. So I started practicing. Not just with Mark, but with everyone. my coworkers, the cashier at the grocery store, my children when they came home from school. I stopped interrupting, stopped thinking about what I was going to say next. I just listened, and the world started to look different. People opened up in ways I hadn't expected. They shared their fears, their hopes, their small victories. And I realized I had been moving through life with blinders on, missing all of it. For those of you learning English, this is the part one want you to pay attention to. You don't learn a language by memorizing vocabulary lists. You learn it by being in the mess of real conversation, by listening to how people actually talk, by making mistakes and laughing about them, by being willing to sound a little foolish in order to connect. Mark had figured this out years ago. His English wasn't perfect, but it was alive. It was the English of people, not textbooks. And people responded to that. I started joining Mark on more rides. Not just Saturdays, but sometimes weekday evenings when the kids were with friends. I became his unofficial co-pilot. And somewhere in those hours of driving and listening, I started to understand something about America that I had missed before. This country isn't built on big successes. It's built on small ones. On the Uber driver who makes a nervous passenger feel calm. On the cashier who asks how your day is and actually waits for the answer. On the immigrant who learns English not to pass a test, but to tell her story. Mark had found his place in that America. Not in a corner office, but in the front seat of a car, driving people through a city he had come to love. He knew the shortcuts, the best coffee shops, the streets that lit up at sunset. He knew the names of his regular passengers. He knew which restaurants had just opened, and which ones had been there for 50 years. He knew the city in a way I never would, because I had always been in too much of a hurry to look. One evening, we were driving home after a long shift. The kids were already asleep. The city was quiet. And Mark said out of nowhere, "You know what I missed most? When you used to laugh. Really laugh. Not the polite laugh you do at work. The one you used to do when we first got married. I missed that sound." I started crying again. Not sad tears. Tears of recognition. Because I had missed that version of me too. The one who laughed easily. The one who wasn't always performing, always measuring, always waiting for the next thing. I reached over and took his hand. "I'm coming back," I said. "I'm coming back to you." He squeezed my hand and didn't let go. We drove home in silence, but it wasn't the cold silence of the past 2 years. It was a warm silence. A silence of two people who didn't need to fill every space with words, because they finally understood each other. The healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks. Days when I slipped back into old habits, when the pressure of work or money or parenting made me pull away. But now I had a new skill. I noticed when it was happening. I could feel myself building the wall again. And I knew how to stop. I would climb into the passenger seat, and Mark would drive, and the city would pass by, and I would remember what mattered. This is what I want to leave you with in this part of the story. Whether you're learning English or rebuilding a relationship or finding your way in a new country, the work is the same. It's showing up. Every day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. It's listening. It's being willing to look foolish, to make mistakes, to start over. It's choosing connection over pride, presence over performance. Mark didn't save our marriage with a grand gesture. He saved it with 1,000 small ones. With the coffee he made every morning. With the patience he showed when I couldn't find my words. With the way he never stopped seeing me, even when I had stopped seeing him. And in learning to see him again, I found something I didn't know I had lost, myself. The language of love, I've learned, isn't spoken with perfect grammar. It's spoken with presence, with attention, with the choice to turn toward someone instead of away. And once you learn that language, once you start speaking it, everything else starts to make sense. the English you're practicing, the life you're building, the person you're becoming, it all comes back to the same thing. Showing up. Being there. Choosing connection. That silver Honda became our classroom. Mark was my teacher. And the lesson was simple. Stop looking for what's missing. Start seeing what's already there. The little eyes that watch us. Have you ever stopped to think about what your children are learning from you? Not from the lessons you teach them, but from the way you live. From the silences you keep. From the way you look at your spouse when you think no one is watching. I didn't think about it. Not once. I was so consumed by my own pain, my own disappointment, my own pursuit of something I thought I needed, that I forgot there were two little eyes watching everything I did. Two little hearts learning what love looks like from me. Our children, Mia, 7, and Leo, 5, had been living in the same house I had built. The house with the thick walls. The house where mommy and daddy barely talked. The house where love was something that happened in other families, not ours. I didn't realize what I was teaching them until one evening when I overheard Mia playing with her dolls. She had set up two dolls facing away from each other. One doll said, "I'm busy." The other doll said nothing. And then Mia said in a small voice, "That's what mommy and daddy do." I stood in the doorway, my heart cracking open. 7 years old. She was 7 years old. And she had already learned that love meant distance. That marriage meant two people sitting in the same room pretending the other wasn't there. I had taught her that. Not with words, but with my silence. With my coldness. With the way I had turned away from Mark every night for 2 years. That moment changed something in me. Because I realized that my marriage wasn't just about me and Mark anymore. It was about two little humans who were learning how to love from watching us. And what were we teaching them? That love is conditional. That love disappears when things get hard. That the person you promised to love forever can become invisible to you if they don't meet your expectations. For those of you learning English, here's a word that matters. Model. It means to show by example. Parents model behavior for their children. They don't just tell them how to be, they show them. I had been modeling distance. Mark, to his credit, had been modeling patience. He never spoke badly about me to the kids. He never let them see his hurt. When I was cold, he was warm with them. When I was absent, he was present. He was showing them a different way, even when I couldn't see it. The night I heard Mia with her dolls, I went to Mark and told him. I cried again. I was crying a lot in those days. And Mark, being Mark, didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't say, "You should have thought of that sooner." He just put his arms around me and said, "Then we show them something different. Starting now." And that was it. No blame. No punishment. Just a decision. We would show our children something different. The next morning I made breakfast. Not just for the kids, but for Mark. I set a plate for him at the table. Mia looked at the plate, then at me and said, "Is Daddy eating with us?" I said yes. Daddy is eating with us. And when Mark came in, I looked at him and smiled. A real smile. Mia saw it. I saw her see it. And in that small moment, something shifted in our house. I started paying attention to the little eyes. When I wanted to snap at Mark about something small, I remembered Mia's dolls. When I wanted to retreat into my phone, I remembered that Leo was watching. I started asking myself, what am I teaching them right now? Am I teaching them that love is warm or that love is cold? That love speaks or that love stays silent? And every day, I made a choice. The choice to turn toward Mark instead of away. The choice to speak instead of stay silent. The choice to model the kind of love I wanted my children to have when they grew up. Leo, being 5, was simpler. He didn't understand the complexity of what had happened between us. But he noticed the change. One afternoon, he climbed onto the couch between me and Mark and said, "Mommy and Daddy are sitting together." And he smiled. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. And I realized that for him, it was becoming normal. The healing was becoming normal. The love was coming back into the room, and he could feel it. Mark started taking the kids on rides with him sometimes. Short ones, when he was between shifts. They loved it. They would sit in the back seat, looking out the windows, pointing at buildings, asking questions. And Mark would answer. He would tell them about the city, about the people, about the little stories that made up a life. They were learning their father in a way I had never let them before. They were learning that he was not just a man who left early and came home late. He was a person. A person with stories and kindness, and a gentle way of seeing the world. I joined them on those rides whenever I could. The four of us in the silver Honda, driving through the city, listening to music, laughing at nothing. And I thought, this is what I almost threw away. This is what I was too blind to see. Not a corner office. Not a job title. Not the approval of people who didn't know my name. These 4 seats. These 3 people. This ordinary, extraordinary life. For those of you learning English, let me teach you a phrase. To be present. It means to be fully here, in this moment, not thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. I had spent years being absent from my own life. Always chasing the next thing, the better thing, the thing that would finally make me feel like I had arrived. And all along, the only thing that mattered was sitting in my own house, waiting for me to notice. Children don't need perfect parents. They don't need parents who have all the answers, or never make mistakes. What they need is parents who are willing to try. Parents who can say, I was wrong and mean it. Parents who can show them that love is not a feeling that comes and goes, but a choice you make every single day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Mia doesn't set her dolls facing away from each other anymore. Now she sets them side by side. Sometimes one doll hands the other a cup of coffee. Sometimes they laugh together. She's modeling what she sees now. And that is my greatest victory. Not the promotion I finally got, not the money in the bank, not the approval of anyone outside these walls. It's that my daughter is learning what love looks like from a marriage that almost broke, but chose to heal. The little eyes are always watching. And they are watching you too. Whether you have children or not, someone is watching. Your friend who needs to see what resilience looks like. Your sibling who is struggling in their own relationship. The stranger at the coffee shop who notices how you treat the person beside you. We are all models for someone. And the question is, what are we teaching? Mark and I are still learning. Every day. The healing didn't end with that first conversation. It continues in every choice, every word, every moment we turn toward each other instead of away. And the little eyes are watching. But now they are watching love. Real love. The kind that breaks and mends. The kind that chooses to stay. The kind that holds forever. Even when forever looked like it might slip away. Redefining success in America. Have you ever asked yourself what success actually means? Not the version your parents told you about. Not the version you see on social media. Not the version that comes in a corner office with a window overlooking a city you're too busy to enjoy. I mean your version. The version that would make you feel, at the end of your life, that you had lived well. I had never asked myself that question. I had absorbed a definition of success from the culture around me, from the people I wanted to impress, from the voice in my head that said more is better, faster is stronger, visible is valuable. And that borrowed definition had almost cost me everything. America is a country built on the idea of success. You hear it everywhere. The American dream. The promise that if you work hard enough, you can become anything. It's a beautiful idea. But it's also a dangerous one. Because it convinces that you need to be constantly climbing, constantly achieving, constantly becoming something more. And somewhere in that endless climb, you can lose sight of what actually matters. I was a victim of that dream. I arrived in America with a suitcase and a degree and the firm belief that I was going to make it. Whatever it meant. I worked late, studied hard, took certifications, networked, interviewed, clawed my way up from receptionist to marketing coordinator to marketing manager. Each step felt like progress. Each title felt like proof that I was succeeding. But each step also pulled me further away from my family. Further away from Mark. Further away from the quiet joy of being present. Mark, meanwhile, was redefining success in a way I couldn't see. He wasn't climbing a corporate ladder. He was building something else. A reputation. A network. A life of small, meaningful connections. His passengers remembered him. They requested him on the app. They left reviews that said things like best driver in the city, and made my day better, and actually listens. He had found a way to matter without a title. He had found a way to succeed without climbing. I didn't understand that at first. I looked at his income, compared it to what he used to make as an engineer, and saw failure. I looked at his car, his uniform, his routine, and saw a life that had fallen short. But I was looking with the wrong eyes. I was using a measuring stick that was never meant for him. And in doing so, I was missing the profound truth that Mark had discovered. Success is not about what you accumulate. It's about who you become. And who you help become. For those of you learning English, here's a phrase that matters. To measure twice, cut once. It's a saying from carpentry. It means to be sure before you act. Once with the yardstick of the world, money, status, titles, and once with the yardstick of the heart, love, connection, presence. If you only use the first yardstick, you'll end up with a life that looks successful on paper, but feels empty inside. I know. I lived it. The shift in my thinking didn't happen overnight. It happened in small moments. Like the time Mark came home and told me about a passenger who had been laid off. He had spent 20 minutes talking to her, helping her think through her options. A week later, she called the Uber support line to leave a compliment for him. She said, "That driver saved my hope." Saved her hope. That was Mark's work. Not moving people from point A to point B. Moving them from despair to possibility. Another time, a young man from Nigeria got in Mark's car. He had just arrived in America 3 days earlier. He was scared, alone, didn't know anyone. Mark took him to his destination, then spent an extra 30 minutes showing him around the neighborhood, pointing out the grocery store, the library, the places where other immigrants gathered. He gave him his number and said, "If you need anything, call me." That young man is now a nurse at a hospital in our city. He still calls Mark sometimes, just to say thank you. What is that worth? What is the value of being the person who welcomes someone to a new country? Who helps them not feel alone? Who shows them that there is kindness in this strange, overwhelming place? There's no salary for that. No title. No LinkedIn endorsement. But that is success. That is the kind of success that echoes through lives, through families, through generations. Mark had found it. And I had been too busy climbing to see. I started to change how I thought about my own work. I stopped chasing titles and started asking different questions. Not, how do I get promoted? But how do I make a difference? Not what looks good on my resume. But what matters to me? Not what will impress other people. But what will make me proud when I look back? The answers surprised me. They had nothing to do with corner offices. They had everything to do with presence, with integrity, with using my skills to help, not just to advance. I started bringing what I learned from Mark into my own work. I listened more. I asked better questions. I showed up for my colleagues the way Mark showed up for his passengers. And something shifted. The work became lighter. Not easier, but lighter. Because I stopped carrying the weight of needing to prove myself. I started focusing on being useful instead of being impressive. And when I did that, the promotions actually came. But by then, they didn't matter the way they used to. They were nice. But they weren't my definition of success anymore. Mark and I started talking about what success meant to us. Together. Not my version or his version, but our version. We decided that success meant our children growing up knowing they were loved. It meant being able to help our families back home. It meant having a home that felt like a refuge, not a battleground. It meant laughing together. It meant being present for the small moments. The dinners. The walks. The Saturday drives in the silver Honda. We also redefined success in practical ways. We stopped comparing ourselves to other families. Stopped measuring our lives against the highlight reels we saw on social media. We focused on what we had, not what we lacked. And what we had was enough. More than enough. We had each other. We had our children. We had our health. We had a city that had become home. We had stories and memories and a future we were building together, slowly, imperfectly, but together. For those of you learning English, let me tell you something. The language is not the goal. The goal is connection. The goal is being able to tell your story, to hear someone else's story, to build a life in a new language. Don't measure your progress by how perfect your grammar is. Measure it by the moments you connect. By the conversations that leave you feeling understood. By the relationships you build, one imperfect sentence at a time. Mark's English was never perfect. It still isn't. He mixes up tenses sometimes. He uses phrases that aren't quite right. But his English is alive. It reaches people. It comforts them. It helps them feel seen. And that, I've learned, is what language is for. Not to be perfect. To be present. To be human. America taught me a new definition of success. Not the one I came looking for. A better one. One that fits inside a silver Honda. One that lives in the space between two people who chose to stay. One that grows in the quiet moments when no one is watching. That is the success I want now. Not the kind that impresses strangers. The kind that sustains a life. What if I had kept ignoring? I want you to imagine something with me. Close your eyes for a moment if you're comfortable. Imagine a version of your life where you never made that one change. Never had that conversation. Never took that first step toward healing. Imagine waking up 5 years from now, 10 years from now, in the same silence, the same distance, the same wall you built between yourself and the person you love. What does that life look like? Who are you in that life? And more importantly, who have you become? I think about this often. Not because I want to live in regret, but because I need to remember what was at stake. The question that became the title of this video. What if the person you ignore holds you forever? It's not just a question. It's a warning. A warning I almost didn't hear. And when I imagine the path I was on, the path I was walking so confidently toward nowhere, it stops my heart. If I had kept ignoring Mark, what would have happened? Let me paint that picture for you. First, the silence would have continued. That cold, heavy silence that filled our house like fog. We would have become experts at avoidance. I would have stayed late at work. He would have taken extra shifts. Our children would have grown up thinking that love meant two people living parallel lives under the same roof. Mia would have set her dolls facing away from each other for years, not months. And eventually, she would have stopped noticing that anything was wrong, because it would have become normal. Then the resentment would have grown. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't scream but whispers, "You deserve better." I would have started looking for happiness outside my marriage. Not necessarily another person. Maybe just another version of myself. The version that didn't have to explain her husband's job at dinner parties. The version that didn't have to feel small when people asked, What does he do? I would have pulled further away, finding fulfillment in work, in achievements, in the hollow approval of people who didn't actually know me. Mark would have kept driving. He would have kept being kind to passengers, kept listening, kept finding meaning in small moments. But at home, he would have retreated further. He would have stopped hoping I would see him, stopped waiting for me to come back. The man I watched from the hallway that night, the one who said I still love her, that man would have eventually run out of love. Not because he stopped caring, because he would have realized that love, when it's never returned, eventually becomes a wound too deep to carry. And then what? Maybe we would have stayed together for the children. That's what people say, isn't it? We're staying together for the kids. As if children don't notice when their parents are ghosts in the same house. As if growing up in a home without love is better than growing up in two homes where love is real. Mia and Leo would have learned that marriage is endurance, not partnership. That love is something you survive, not something you celebrate. And one day, they would have repeated that lesson in their own lives, because that's what we were teaching them. Maybe we would have divorced. I think about that possibility often. The papers, the arguments, the division of things that were never supposed to be divided. The children moving between houses. The awkward holidays. The slow erasure of a life we had built together. Mark would have found someone eventually. Someone who saw him. Someone who appreciated his kindness, his patience, the way he made people feel seen. And I would have watched from a distance, knowing that I had let go of something irreplaceable, because I was too proud to hold on. And what about me? What would I have become? I think about that woman sometimes. The version of me who never climbed into the passenger seat. Never listened to Mark talk to Mrs. Helen about her tomatoes. Never heard him comfort the young man who lost his job. Never learned to see again. That woman would have gotten her promotions. Maybe she would have a corner office by now. A title that sounds impressive. A salary that looks good on paper. But what would be inside her? What would she carry with her every night when she went home to an empty house? Or a house where someone she used to love slept in another room? I think she would be lonely. Deeply, profoundly lonely. Because she would have learned that success doesn't fill the space where love used to be. That achievements don't warm you at night. That the approval of strangers doesn't matter when the person who knows you best has stopped looking. She would have everything she thought she wanted, and nothing she actually needed. And maybe late at night, she would think about the silver Honda. About the man who drove it. About the life she walked away from. And she would wonder what might have been. For those of you learning English, let me teach you a phrase. To live with regret. It means to carry the weight of a choice you wish you could undo. I almost learned to live with regret. I was days away, maybe hours away, from a life of wondering, what if? And the only thing that saved me was a choice. One choice. To get in the car. To ask to ride with him. To finally, after 2 years, turn toward the person I had been ignoring. Here's what I've learned about ignoring. It feels like nothing in the moment. It feels like you're just busy, just focused, just protecting yourself from disappointment. But ignoring is not neutral. It's active. Every time you look away, you're choosing. Every time you stay silent, you're deciding. Every time you let another day pass without saying, I see you. I love you, I'm here. You're building something. Not a life. A wall. And walls don't just keep people out. They trap you inside with all the things you were too afraid to say. I almost miss my forever. Mark was sitting in my house, in my bed, in my life, and I was looking everywhere but at him. I was so focused on what I didn't have that I couldn't see what I did have. A man who loved me without condition. A man who never stopped waiting for me to come back. A man who held my forever in his hands and never once let go. Even when I was too blind to hold it too. What if I had kept ignoring? I don't have to wonder. I know exactly what would have happened. I would have lost him. Maybe not legally, not on paper, but in every way that matters. And I would have spent the rest of my life trying to find my way back to a door I had closed myself. So here's my question for you. And I mean this. I'm not asking it for dramatic effect. I'm asking it because I need you to hear it. Who or what are you ignoring right now? Not because you don't care. Maybe because you're scared. Maybe because you're waiting for the right moment. Maybe because you think you have more time. But what if you don't? What if the person you're ignoring today is the person who holds your forever? What if the dream you're putting off is the one that could save your life? What if the apology you're not saying is the only thing standing between you and peace? I almost learned the answer to those questions the hard way. But I got lucky. I got a second chance. And I want you to know that you can have one too. But you have to take it. You have to turn toward what you've been ignoring. You have to say the words you've been holding back. You have to choose, right now, to see what you've been looking past. Because forever is not guaranteed. It's not something you can put on hold and come back to when it's convenient. Forever is happening right now. In this moment. In the person beside you. In the choice you're about to make. Don't wait until it's too late to realize what you had. Don't be the person who looks back and wonders, what if I had just turned around? I almost was that person. But I turned. And that one turn changed everything. Forever is built in the ordinary. Here's what nobody tells you about happy endings. They don't happen in one moment. They don't arrive with fireworks or dramatic music or a single grand gesture that fixes everything. Happy endings, I've learned, are not endings at all. They are beginnings. Quiet, ordinary beginnings that unfold one day at a time. In the spaces between big moments. In the choices you make when no one is watching and nothing dramatic is happening. When I tell people our story, they sometimes expect a Hollywood ending. They want to hear about the night Mark quit Uber and landed his dream engineering job. Or the day I won some huge award and thanked him on stage. Or the vacation we took to somewhere expensive where we danced on a beach at sunset. But that's not our story. Our story is smaller. And because it's smaller, it's truer. Mark still drives. He still picks up passengers in the silver Honda. He still comes home with stories about Mrs. Helen's tomatoes and the young man from Brazil, and the woman who needed someone to listen. He doesn't want to go back to engineering. Not anymore. He found something he never had in an office, freedom. Freedom to set his own hours. Freedom to be present for our children. I still have ambitions. But I measure them differently now. I leave work at work. I come home. I make dinner with Mark. I help the kids with their homework. I sit on the couch and watch a movie without checking my phone every 5 minutes. I am present. And that presence has made me better at everything else. Because when you stop running from yourself, you stop running from your life. The healing didn't happen in one conversation. It happened in 1,000 small moments. The morning Mark made coffee and I actually said thank you. The evening I asked about his day and listened to the answer. The night we put the kids to bed together and laughed about something Leo said. The Saturday drives that became our ritual. The ordinary, unremarkable days that somehow, when you add them up, become a life. For those of you learning English, here's a phrase that matters. The sum of small things. It means that big results come from many small actions, not one large one. You don't learn English in one study session. You learn it in the 5 minutes you practice every day. In the conversations you have even when you're not confident. In the mistakes you make and learn from. In the patience you show yourself. Healing a marriage is the same. It's not one big apology. It's the daily choice to turn toward each other instead of away. Mark and I still have hard days. We still argue sometimes. We still get tired and frustrated and forget to be kind. But now we have a foundation. We know how to come back. We have the Saturday drives, the coffee in the morning, the small rituals that remind us who we are. We have the silver Honda. That car has become a symbol for us. Not of failure, but of redemption. Of a place where two people who had lost each other found their way back. The kids notice. Of course they notice. Mia, who is 8 now, wrote a story for school about her family. She wrote, "My daddy drives a car and helps people. My mommy works in an office and helps people. They both help people. And they help each other." She spelled some words wrong. The grammar wasn't perfect. But the meaning was. She sees us. She sees what we built. And that, more than anything, tells me we succeeded. Leo is 6 now. He wants to be a driver when he grows up. Not because he thinks it's a job. Because he thinks. Mark doesn't correct him. He doesn't say, "You should be an engineer," or "You should aim higher." He says, "You can be anything you want. But whatever you do, be kind." That's the lesson. Not the job title. The kindness. I think about the question that started this video. What if the person you ignore holds your forever? For me, that person was Mark. But I've realized something since then. It's not just people we ignore. We ignore ourselves sometimes. We ignore the quiet voice that tells us what we actually need. We ignore the small joys that are already here, in this moment, waiting to be noticed. We ignore the life we have because we're so focused on the life we think we should have. I was ignoring Mark. But I was also ignoring myself. The version of me who didn't need a corner office to feel worthy. The version of me who could laugh easily, who could be present, who could love without conditions. That version of me was waiting behind the wall I had built. And when I finally let the wall down, not just for Mark, but for myself, I found her. She had been there all along. I just stopped seeing her. Forever is not a destination. It's not something you arrive at when you finally have enough money or enough success or enough approval from people who don't know your name. Forever is here. It's the ordinary moments. The coffee in the morning. The drive across the city. The quiet conversation after the kids are asleep. The choice to stay when leaving would be easier. The choice to see when looking away would be simpler. Forever is built in the ordinary. Mark and I don't have a perfect marriage. We don't have a perfect life. We have a real one. A real one that almost fell apart because I was too proud and too scared to see what was right in front of me. But we saved it. Not with one grand gesture. With 1,000 small ones. With the choice to turn toward each other, day after day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. I want you to know that you can do this too. Whatever you're ignoring, a person, a dream, a part of yourself, you can still turn toward it. It's not too late. The wall you built can come down. Not in one dramatic moment, but in the small choices you make every day. The conversation you finally have. The apology you finally say. The first step you finally take. Forever is waiting for you. But you have to choose it. Not once. Every day. In the ordinary moments. In the small things. That's where love lives. That's where healing happens. That's where you find the life you almost lost. Our silver Honda is still in the driveway. It has more miles on it now. A few scratches. A stain on the back seat from a juice box Leo dropped. It's not a perfect car. But it's ours. And every time I see it, I remember. I remember the night I sat in the passenger seat and finally saw my husband. I remember the Saturday drives that rebuilt us. I remember that forever isn't something you find. It's something you build. One ordinary moment at a time. Your forever is waiting in plain sight. We have arrived at the final part of this story. And if you've made it this far with me, through the silence, the pain, the healing, the ordinary days that became extraordinary, then I want you to know something. This story was never really about me. It was about you. It was about the question that sits in your chest right now, the one you maybe haven't said out loud. What if the person I ignore holds my forever? I started this video with that question. And now, at the end, I want to give you the answer I found. Not the answer I thought I would find when I was chasing titles and promotions, and the approval of people who didn't know my name. But the real answer. The one that lives in a silver Honda, in a small apartment, in a family that almost broke but chose to heal. The person you're ignoring, whether it's a partner, a child, a parent, a friend, or even a version of yourself, that person holds your forever. Not because they can give you something. Not because they can make your life easier or more impressive. But because forever is not a thing you own. It's a thing you share. It's built in the moments you turn toward someone instead of away. In the words you finally say after years of silence. In the choice to see what you've been looking past. Mark held my forever. I didn't know it when I was ignoring him. I thought my forever was somewhere else. In a career. In a house. In the next thing I hadn't achieved yet. But forever was sitting in my driveway every morning, starting a silver Honda, driving into a city that didn't always welcome him. Coming home to a wife who didn't always see him. And somehow miraculously he kept holding it. He kept waiting. He kept believing that I would turn around. I did turn around. Not because I was brave. Because I was scared. Scared of what I would become if I kept going the way I was going. Scared of the woman I saw in the mirror, who had forgotten how to love. Scared of waking up one day, and realizing that I had let my forever slip through my fingers, because I was too busy looking somewhere else. And that fear, that holy, humbling fear, saved me. For those of you learning English, let me teach you one final phrase. To come full circle. It means to return to where you started, but with more understanding. I have come full circle in this story. I started in a place of blindness, ignoring the person who loved me most. I went through pain, through silence, through a slow and painful awakening. And now I'm here, in the same house with the same husband, the same children, the same silver Honda in the driveway. But everything is different. Because I see differently. You can come full circle too. Whatever you've been ignoring, you can turn toward it. It's not too late. It's never too late to say, I was wrong. It's never too late to say, I see you. It's never too late to choose presence over pride, connection over performance, love over fear. The wall you built can come down. Not in one dramatic moment, but in the small choices you make starting today. The text you send. The conversation you start. The apology you finally offer. The first step you take. This video was designed to help you practice English. To listen to a story told slowly, clearly, with words you can follow. But the practice isn't just about language. It's about life. The same muscles you use to learn a new language. Patience, humility, the willingness to make mistakes. The courage to keep trying even when it's hard. Those are the same muscles you need to heal a relationship. To rebuild a life. To find your way back to what matters. Mark and I are still learning. Every day. We still have moments where we misunderstand each other. Where old habits creep back in. Where the weight of life makes us forget to be kind. But we have a practice now. A practice of turning toward each other. Of listening. Of choosing presence. And that practice has become our language. Not English. Not Vietnamese. The language of us. The language of two people who almost lost each other and decided, together, to hold on. If you're watching this and you're struggling with English, I want you to know that you can do it. Not because you need to be perfect. Because you need to connect. And connection doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. It requires showing up, making mistakes, laughing at yourself, trying again. Mark taught me that. He taught me that language is not a test you pass. It's a bridge you build. one imperfect word at a time. If you're watching this and you're struggling in a relationship, I want you to know that you can heal. Not because it will be easy, because it's worth it. The person you're ignoring might not be perfect. They might have hurt you. They might have disappointed you. But if they hold your forever, if they are the one who sees you, who waits for you, who carries your heart without you even knowing, then they are worth turning toward, worth speaking to, worth fighting for. I almost missed my forever. I was days away, hours maybe, but I turned. And that turn changed everything. Not overnight, not with fireworks, but slowly, quietly, in the ordinary moments that became extraordinary because I finally saw them. Now, I want to leave you with something Mark told me one night, on a Saturday drive. When the city was quiet and the kids were asleep, and it was just the two of us in the silver Honda. He said, "You know what forever is? It's not a long time. It's a deep time. It's the depth of the moments you actually live, not the length of the years you survive." I didn't understand him at first, but I do now. Forever is the morning coffee you actually taste, the conversation you actually hear, the hand you actually hold, the choice you actually make, right now, to be present in your own life. That's forever. And it's waiting for you. Right here. In this moment. In the person beside you. In the dream you've been putting off. In the words you've been afraid to say. So I'll ask you one more time. The question that started this story. The question that changed my life. What if the person you ignore holds your forever? If you know the answer, don't wait. Turn around. Say the words. Take the first step. Your forever is waiting. And it's closer than you think. So here we are. At the end of this story, but maybe at the beginning of yours. Because the truth is, I didn't just tell you about a silver Honda and a man I almost lost. I told you about the moment I woke up. The moment I stopped sleepwalking through my own life and finally saw what had been there all along. You have a silver Honda in your life. Something, or someone, you've been passing by every single day, too busy, too tired, too afraid to really see. And maybe you think you have more time. Maybe you think forever will wait. But I learned the hard way that forever doesn't wait. It shows up every morning, grabs its keys and leaves. And one day, if you're not paying attention, it doesn't come back. So here's my question for you, and I want you to really sit with it. What if the person you're ignoring right now is the one holding your forever? What if the dream you're putting off is the only one that could save you? What if the words you're not saying are the only ones that could heal everything? I almost missed my answer. But I got lucky. I got a second chance. And now I'm here making this video, not because I have it all figured out, but because I know what it's like to almost lose everything before you realize what you had. If this story touched something in you, if it made you think of someone, something, some part of yourself you've been ignoring, then don't let that feeling fade. Don't close this video and go back to the same silence. Do something. Say something. Turn around. And if you want to keep walking this path with me, through real stories, real English, real healing, then hit that subscribe button. Not for me. For yourself. For the version of you who is ready to stop ignoring and start living. I'll be here. With more stories. More lessons. More moments that remind us why we're all here. To connect, to grow, to hold on to what matters. Because your forever isn't out there somewhere. It's right here. In this moment. In the choice you're about to make. So make it.